Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi folks, and welcome to this week's podcast. And this one is specifically designed for women, but also for the men folk to get more of an understanding of sometimes how women feel, how we repress ourselves and what shows up for us, and what it is like to have that feminine energy running through our system and what it is that impacts us not showing up fully as ourselves. So we're going to take a look at that from a cultural aspect and also how we as women impact other women with the collective shadows that we're carrying. So first off, folks, we're going to look at, the parts of ourselves that to be a woman we need to cast out or hide within the shadows, to be in the working world, to be a mother, to be the many roles that we play and the masks that we wear. So looking at what the shadow itself is, our shadows, the parts of ourselves that we've exiled out, dumped or cast aside because we don't believe it's safe for those parts to show up. It's the orphan parts that we've felt shamed for having in the past, be it our sensitivities, being emotional, being sexual, all of these things. We learn over time through cultural and religious program to repress these parts of ourselves and hide them in the shadows. And what can happen for us then as adults is that's how we're showing up as women. And that's how we're treating one another. And this comes from our society and from our culture, but we carry it ourselves and we come from this. This is how we behave towards one another. Collective shadows are, and collective programming, it starts out in the womb. From before we're even born, we're inside our own mother's womb and we're taking on, as we're growing and forming, we're also absorbing our own mother's trauma, our own mother's pain, through our very DNA. And this is before we're even born. And then when we do come into this world, we're taught how to be a woman, how to be a female, how to be feminine. And we take this on from what we're surrounded with, from the religion we're in, from the society we're in, from what we see on media. We learn what upsets others, what keeps us safe, what's okay to touch, what's okay not to touch, how it's okay to dress. And we then, from children, carry this out in our adults' life, like even down to, girls play with dolls, girls play with Barbies, they dress up Barbies, boys play with cars and He-Man and Action Men. This is how we've grown up. And I know slowly culture is changing and religion is changing, but we're carrying a lot of that oppression and those repressive beliefs, and they show up in how we treat ourselves and how we treat others. And our own shadows, our own oppression and repression can often be triggered by other women, by other men also. But this particular podcast is looking at ourselves as women. The masks we wear to be accepted in society, whether, it's, never shown that you have hormones, never shown that you're emotional, never shown that you're sensitive, wearing particular workwear for going to work, wearing particular homeware, what way you should show up as a mother, what way you should show up as a co-worker, all of these things. And we build an identity around them for us to be accepted as a woman, for us to be accepted by society, for us to not over-sexualize ourselves, for us not to be seen as promiscuous. And what happens is we take on board all of these beliefs from our religions, from, down to the immortal sin of Eve and that she came from the rib, the bone of Adam, the man. And we take these on and we learn these as children. And these become built in our structure of our own identity. And then when we go out into the world, we behave towards other people according to our own beliefs and what we believe. And one of the things that this really shows up in, and we don't tend to shine a light on it, is slut shaming. We grew up, especially going back to decades ago and sometimes even now, with the belief that our sole role was to get and gain the love of a man, for us to become a wife, for us to become a mother. And as I say, although that's culturally changing in a lot of cultures, we have a long way to go. Whether we want to believe this or not, it's fact, it's ingrained in our culture. The women stayed at home and played the mother role from a very young age, often as young as 16. Our role was to gain a husband, to get a partner, to go out there, to remain unsoiled, clean for that particular man. That was how we were in society. Even you look at religion and what religion tells us, you know, no sex before marriage, no contraception, no abortion, all of these things. And these things were shamed hugely for us as women. And even down to looking at Irish culture, we closed down our last Magdalen laundry in 1994. Prior to that, women were put in there if they were abused, if they were deemed as being promiscuous, if they looked at a man the wrong way or were pulled up their dress and showed themselves as children, all of these reasons. And all of this we still carry the trauma and the weight of. And some of the ways that shows up is in one, how we believe we need to show up in the world and how we treat other women because of that. The pain that we've went through as women, and a lot of this that we've embodied through our culture, we often perpetuate onto other women. We throw it onto other women. We internalize this, and we look at other women, and we look at women on social media, in how they show up. We'll look at a woman walking into a room. Is she showing too much cleavage? Is she too sexy looking? Is she too... We do have type parameters that we feel we need to be. And you even look at the difference between the way a female will sit and the way a male will sit. It's acceptable for a man to open his legs and sit in a pair of jeans or trousers. But if a woman sits like that, she feels uncomfortable. It's not done. A woman should sit cross-legged or with her legs closed. And again, these are only small things, but they show up so much. And as I say, in how we behave towards other women, it's in the recognising of our own shadows, our own judgments and issues with other women that allows us to begin to empower ourselves and empower others. Like when we look at ageism, it is absolutely not okay for a woman to age gracefully. We do so much to ourselves to fight that process so much, because a woman has to remain beautiful and pretty and show up. But we've so many chemicals that we inject ourselves with to try and prevent ageism, because we do know women of an older age and are longer seamed, they're spinsters. This is how we class them. They're put out to pasture, or whatever way we want to look at it. And it's changing these things within ourselves and these feelings. And because we perpetuate them onto other women, sexism, body shaming. How do you feel when you see someone, a larger woman or a bigger woman or a really thin woman? What are our responses to that? How do we react when we see someone with an absolutely, super fit body that works out 8 times a day or whatever it is? What are our own judgments on that? Because we shame one another so much in so many ways, down to their in what they wear. I know certainly for me and for most of my life, when I'd walk into a room filled with people for an event or for anything like that, I would have more concern over what a woman's opinion of me was than a man. I will look around more at women in a room. Although I'm sexually attracted to men, I will watch women more in a room than I will men. And I'll react differently, as we probably all do, to a compliment I'll get from a woman in comparison to a compliment I get from a man. Will I think I'm beautiful and sexy if I get it off a man, but from a woman I would probably deem that as approval and that I'm okay. We put different weight down to our own beliefs and our own judgments, and we have so much criteria we force ourselves to fit into. No body hair. Women, it's not okay for women to show up. Even you look at social media, a woman that shows up with a hairy body, a mustache and hair in her armpits. Even think of how you felt when I mentioned mustache. It is not okay, and that's us judging other women. We are supposed to be submissive. If we're not submissive, in the past we would deem people a dyke or an angry woman, and that does not only come from men, it comes from us, it comes from women. No cellulite. Cellulite isn't acceptable. We're not allowed this natural process our body does to store fat. Cellulite isn't acceptable. No wrinkles. We have to remain forever youthful. The perfect body, perfect skin, the perfect makeup we spend so much on. And if we see other women showing up outside these parameters and outside these things that we deem acceptable for women, then we're shaming them. We're either slut shaming them, or we're categorizing them as being depressed, not caring about themselves, not fitting into that mode. So it's looking at our own judgments and how we treat one another that helps us break the paradigm of that Madonna whore split. We're either one or the other. We've to be this virgin woman, unsoiled and acceptable for a man, or we're the other side. We're the whore that's shown far too much cleavage. This has come down through religion, through society, through cultural beliefs. It's embedded in most cultures. There are 200 million women walking this planet today that have had their genitals mutilated from a young age due to how those cultures and those religious beliefs deem what's acceptable for a woman to have and not to have. And that comes down to the basic orgasm. That comes down to women aren't allowed to or supposed to do that. And what it stops us doing is even looking at our own body. I have had so many clients in classes, in one-to-ones, and in all of those spaces that haven't looked at particular parts of their own body for years. They haven't stimulated or pleasured themselves in any way through their own body for years because it's deemed wrong. And that's ingrained in our thoughts and how we feel about ourselves and how we treat others. And this is changed from within. This comes from external, but the change begins in the internal. And that comes from looking at ourselves as a whole. It's looking at yourself, and as I say, for me, it showed up so much. I was a single mother for so long. And I did find when you nearly had this air, or I felt at least, an air of desperation around me, that, it was seen that I was after any man that was around me just because I was single. It wasn't acceptable. People hide their husbands or their partners, or if you're speaking to their husband or their partner, they become uncomfortable, or they think your absolute move is you're going after their partner. That comes from women, not from men. And it's looking at these things and where they're showing up in our lives, and that creates change for us all. That creates changing the structure of how we grew up, changing how our daughters grow up, the ones that are coming up behind us, and what's okay and what's not okay. And one of the places we need to start is loosening the grip on perfection that we have on ourselves. Like, we all know it's age old that we all say, a man takes 5 minutes to get ready. I take, 2 hours, 3 hours. But that's the level that we're doing to ourselves before we think it's okay to go out. That's what we're putting on ourselves as women. So it's loosening the grip on what is okay and what isn't within ourselves. What masks you need to put on before you go out the door, what you're showing yourself to the world as, and what you feel you need to be before you walk out the door, what you believe other women need to be before they're acceptable. Through the repression that we're all carrying from decades, centuries of how a woman was supposed to be, we are now showing up in that way towards one another, towards other women. And does come down, it comes down from media, religion, society. We all, in some way, shape or form, need to work on how we slut shame other women. And that comes down to, we see it in the courts when people are arrested for assaulting women, for sexually assaulting women. It turns to, how many drinks did she have or what was she wearing? Like, that makes it okay for her body to be ravaged, attacked, or any of those things. And we have to look at our own opinions of how we feel when we hear these things happen to other women, because that's shining a light on our own repression. And it's only through changing our own judgments and how we're showing up for one another. That's like, even down to violence against women. Like, where that needs to change is at an education level, educating people on there is better ways of treating other human beings, there's better ways of showing up. But again, this comes down in a lot of cultures as the norm. Oh, you know, there was he had a few drinks, so that's how that happened, or it was acceptable and it was just put up and shut up. But it's changing how we view one another and how we view these things, that is when we'll see changes in society. And these come down from our parents, our grandparents, and their religion and their beliefs and what was okay for them. And it's recognizing what you're carrying and what is and isn't okay for you around other women, what isn't okay for you around yourself, what you allow yourself and what you don't allow yourself to do, whether you're covering up, whether you're hiding, what way you show up, what way you view other women. When you walk into a group of other women, how do you feel? Do you feel completely comfortable or completely uncomfortable? Are you totally in a space where you feel like you're going to be judged, you're going to be put in a box? All of these things, because that shows you apart what we are carrying. So it's, for us as women, it's looking at yourself and looking at what you're carrying down, looking at what triggers you and what you see on social media. What do you find upsetting, distressing, annoying, or what are you judging? What are you seeing in other women that you're pointing the finger and going, she shouldn't be doing that, she's over sexualized, she's over sexualizing herself, she's a hoe, she's a this, she's a that. This is where we'll see change. It's by changing our own attitudes and empowering one another, empowering each other as women, and allowing it to be acceptable if we show some cleavage, or God forbid we open our legs. And you know, it's not an invitation, you know. And I don't mean to sound crude, but this is the reality that we're living in. And it is from ourselves, from internal, we will change the external. And that's by shining a light on our own issues. And even for me, on a whole other note, like, I was working with a group this week, and like that, there was another group that I had with me when I was doing the work, and they started a slagging, and they were slagging me, and they were slagging me over having a deep voice, and yeah, my accent, my tone and everything else. And immediately when it came into that deep voice, I got hugely offended. I got massively offended that they were basically saying I had a deep voice. Now, it sounds so silly, but I was really affronted. So I had to go off and look at what that meant to me and what was triggering me. And it was, for me, I associated that deep voice with, I was masculine, I was coming across as a man, I wasn't feminine, I wasn't a woman, I had this deep dark voice. And I had to look at, so that showed my own attitudes and my own barriers in that, what I believe it is to be a woman and what I believe it is to be a man. So God forbid, what happens if I meet a woman with a really deep voice? Do I decide she's not really a woman, she's unfeminine, she's what? And these are things, again, and I know it's only a small thing, but these are things we carry down, our judgments, our beliefs. And it's changing to make the world a better place for ourselves, for our daughter, for us showing up, that we can even age gracefully. That it's okay for us to age gracefully. It's okay for us to touch our own bodies and get pleasure from that, without thinking God is going to come and strike us from the heavens, or we're going to hell because of it. You know, it's these things, it's changing it for ourselves and how we feel in ourselves as a woman, and changing it overall for society, so the world is a better place for us all going forward, for everybody. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media, or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about, or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews, because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye bye.